Hey everyone, welcome to the Coach's Corner University podcast. I'm your host, Paul O'Neid, coming to you from my home office in Ottawa, Ontario, without the fucking blank beige wall behind me, some nice art. I have a brand new microphone stand, and I'm joined by my friend Tim. Tim, tell the world about you, man. I think you're one of those coaches who operates, I don't want to say operates in the shadows because you obviously have a presence, but you're someone who's doing some really cool things and has some really hot takes on a bunch of topics that I really respect. And you're coming at this, as you know, we mentioned before the podcast started. I only have coaches on who coach from a service first perspective, coaching the client in front of you. And you're always someone who makes that known to the public. So maybe give a short introduction of who you are, what you do, and
Sure.
we'll fucking jump into it.
Dude, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, my pleasure.
Um, yeah, I guess in the shadows, right? That's an interesting one because it's like ideally we all probably want to actually be in the
For
shadows, but we
sure.
have to put ourselves out there.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
right. But yeah, I'll give your audience a bit of like my background so it gives
Please.
some context. So, well, I'll say what I'm doing right now. So briefly, what I do right now is I have an in-person private personal training studio.
Hmm.
And I have that with a few other coaches. So I'm there in person in the mornings, and then I have other coaches there throughout the day, Monday to Friday. And then the rest of my time is spent building and growing my online business. Um, Rewind back. So if we go back to how it got to that point, well, I would have been in high school. So probably similar story is, I don't know, maybe you or a lot of other people listening, but I got into lifting through sports. Classic
Yeah.
one for a lot of people. I was into football. Football was my thing, and I was like, man, I just want to look like Brian Dawkins and Ray Lewis so
Oh
bad.
man, bringing me back.
Dude, I want to look like Sean Taylor so bad.
Maybe not now.
Um, yeah, maybe not now, you know.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Pour one out. But like that was the dream. I just wanted to look sick and nasty. And I was a good 145 pounds and built like a marathon runner from Britain. And yeah, thanks, Dad. But yeah, so that's what got me attracted to lifting weights. And actually specifically, so I had sports and I was training around like four sports, training in the weight room for sports, and that's what got me into it. But specifically getting way more into exercise for me was my cousin, previously in the military, and I think he'd been only in the military for a few years at that point. He's almost 50 now, and actually retired and moved on. But at the time, he was in, a lot of people will recognize this, he was in the CrossFit Journal. And
Oh,
this would have been 2007. So no one knew what CrossFit was. It was just a
right.
military thing. And I didn't know what CrossFit was, but he had printed out the full issue for that month or week or however often they released it of the CrossFit Journal. He had it out in print, and I still remember the big like paper clip on it. And he's like,
Hmm.
dude, check this out. I'm in this, and look at all these cool like sandbag cleans and functional fitness stuff I'm doing. I'm like, dude, this is so badass. I love this. And he was a commanding figure and like alpha male whatever, so I
Right.
was like I looked up to him a lot for sure. And I was like, yeah, I want to do this so bad. So I got into like CrossFit basically for a while, like just exercising. I just love to exercise.
Right.
And then fast forward, I get out of sports after high school, loving I just love to train. Like it just ended up being that obsession, probably was, maybe still is for you too, right? Where we just like to train.
For sure.
And that's when it all started. And then but I got out of sports, and then I was like, cool, I guess I'm just an exerciser now. And then went into went to college late for most people, I guess. I went around 20. So I'd already had 2 years out of high school.
Hmm.
Went to college for fitness and health. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to be a personal trainer because I thought about this for a little while. I'm going to be a personal trainer. The certification, all that stuff you have to do. I can do that through school, but on top of school, I guess I'll get a bunch of other stuff, education with it. So I'll go do this. I'll go do the college thing. It's cheap. It's 2 years. Cool. So I went, decided instead to get a degree in partying and dropped out of college.
Nice.
And then took a hiatus, aggressively using drugs and alcohol for the first half of my 20s. and then climbed out of that around like 25 to 26 over like a couple years. And
Mhm.
then fast forward to 2017-ish, end of 2016, started 2017. And that's when I had my mom's trainer reach she went to this woman's home to train near where we live, and this
Mhm.
woman was retiring, and she'd spoken to my mom and was like, hey, I know Tim want to get into training. I'd be happy to talk with him about taking over my book of business and working with my clients.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was like, yeah, I was like, this is a crazy opportunity, right? I'm gonna,
Yeah.
because up until that point too, I was training at a Good Life Fitness, and I had a lot of friends there that were working as trainers there. And they're like, dude, come work for us, whatever, whatever. And I was like, okay, like I had my personal thoughts about Good Life as a corporation or whatever, which is fine.
And as we all do.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, okay, I could still work here and kind of see it as a stepping stone and respectfully, mutually use our relationship to each other's benefit here in the
For
meantime.
sure.
But knowing that it's not my end goal, I knew that I wanted to do my own thing. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll apply to Good Life probably. And then I had this opportunity come up. So I met with this woman, and she ended up giving me, uh, she gave me, it was only two couples. So four clients, two different homes, and it was in homes.
Mhm.
And I went and trained them for on and off, I guess, several years. But it was over at least the next year where I was like, okay, I gotta actually build a business here.
Right.
I was working part time at Popeye Supplements, selling supplements. I was like, okay, I got to build a business here, and I have I have I have people like reaching out, being like, "Oh, I'd love you to coach me, but I don't have a home gym." You know, I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I guess you're not really that demographic, whatever. I'd also been training some clients, which had allowed me to build up a little bit of revenue in the meantime. But I was training some clients for a buddy who had clients in Toronto, so I was going into Forest Hill and Rexdale and coming back up, and I was doing that kind of loop. And I did that twice a week, so that was helping. But then I was like, man, I don't want to be dry. Like I don't want to. I was
Yeah, that's
thinking
a
long
lot.
game. Yeah, I was like, I don't. I it worked well, but I was like, man, this takes a lot out of me. Getting up at 4 a.m. And then uh being like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna stay in the city if I'm gonna build the business here, right?
Mhm.
But I was like, that's not the long game for me at all. So I moved away from that, and I reached out to my dad. This was a huge blessing for me. Some helpful nepotism, which he had some he he had, you got to take advantage where you can.
100%.
So, and I recognize it, super appreciated. But he has a building in town where I grew up, and he's an optometrist, and he has space underneath, 1,000 square foot unit down there, and there'd been like medical offices back there, down there in the past,
Mhm.
chiropractor, and it was empty. And he's like, actually, it was my mom that suggested. She's like, the space is empty under the office, and I was like, okay, let me go check it out. I don't think I've ever even been down there.
Yeah.
So I went, checked it out, and I'm like, this is perfect. So I set up a squat rack. This is somewhere in 2017. So I set up
Yeah.
this, not even a squat rack, dude. I set up squat stands, like the
Nice.
weightlifting squat stands that
Yeah. Yeah.
you could just like bump into it with your hips and it would just fall over. And so you had to have them perfectly
Safety
lined
first.
up, you know? Yeah. There's no safeties. There's
Okay,
no
so
catch bars on
safety
it.
never.
No, no, it's like I'm hugging everybody, on their squats. So we had the squat stands. I mounted a chin up bar. I had a guitar amp to plug into the iPad. I had two kettlebells, a couple dumbbells, and just like still the ugly paint and the old carpet because it would have been built in 2002 or something.
Yeah.
And so I trained clients one on one there for 2 years until I brought on an RMT, and then because we had an exam room back there.
Mhm.
And then in 2021, I guess about 3 years ago, I had it renovated so that because it was a little chopped up, had a hallway, a couple exam rooms. We just opened it up so that the station that I'd kind of slowly built up over time, we just mirrored that on the other side so that I could get other coaches in there.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that was kind of like the first business milestone in a way where I'm like, oh, I guess this is scaling, kind of, right? I was like,
Well, I
this opens
remember,
up some opportunity.
I think around that time when you announced like the renovations and things like that, that's when I kind of first became aware of who you were and what you were doing. So
Okay.
that's kind of fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, obviously you get into this kind of the same situation as you were initially. It's like, I don't want to go visit people in their homes. How do I scale this business? I get a
Mhm.
studio. Then it becomes, I don't want to spend all day in a studio trading my time for money.
Mm-hmm.
That's the next iteration of this business where you try to transition online. Most coaches try to go at online coaching almost the same way as they do personal training. They say one client, one program at a time. You, I'm sure you do that as well, but what I've seen you post more so and market more so is your group nutrition coaching. How did that whole model come about?
So yeah, that's a good question. So that's perfect because I kind of lead into that. So I had the in-person and then I slowly built up, hired some coaches, and now we have 3 coaches as well as myself working there. And then I was in a position where I'm like, okay, now what I can do instead of doing the typical trainer, like what you said, the trading time for money, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep, I guess if I just keep doing this, I'm going to be training 6 a.m. ish till noon or 11 and then my break. And then, you come
Yeah.
back in the afternoon and train into the evening, the traditional personal trainer schedule. And I was like, I crushed it. I could do it, but
Yeah.
I was like, what's the end game with this? Like, I love coaching, but like, I guess I can only up my rates so much, and I can
Yeah.
only take on so many clients because my time's capped. Like,
Yep.
so you have these questions that everyone has to wrestle with at some point if they do want to grow. Or I need a bigger space, and then I just replicate my model out bigger, right? So I'm like,
Mhm.
those are the only other options, and I'm like, okay, so this means I'm gonna have to work with people online, which obviously just opens up globally to have many billion people in the world. And it's like, so I started doing that, and I probably had the normal, like, what's the word, just like trip ups that normal people would, where it's like you
Mhm.
look back and you're like, oh my goodness, you're like, I can't believe I did that. Where it's like, and I'm thinking back to some of them because I'm sure I forget some, but like the classic of like, I charge $75 a month, right? Or actually 50. When I
I
started, I charged
remember
50.
actually, I remember the first time you and I chatted in person at a competition. I remember you
Oh
telling me
yeah.
you charge, and I was like, bro, what the fuck?
Yeah. 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 And I was totally new to online
For
coaching. I had
sure.
no
Yeah.
idea. I thought what it was what a lot of people think it is when they're introduced to the online coaching world, which is
Mhm.
okay. So, and this is a misconception. So it's like what I thought is online coaching is I deliver a training program and a meal plan. And then I guess if they have questions, they ask me. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yep. For sure.
And then when it's time to bill them again, I guess I'll do it every month because that's what everyone else does. So that's it. Do you want to be in my coach? You want to be coached by me? Hey, I can
Yeah.
give you a meal plan, a training plan. Not thinking that everyone does that. That doesn't provide a result necessarily. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, it's impossible to sell that. It's impossible to scale that because some people are going to buy that. But I had to work through that obviously, and then slowly kind of worked out of that. And then what happened was what kind of developed my philosophy on the actual coaching, and we can kind of get into the back to tactical stuff after. But like what developed my philosophy more so, which kind of bled into the online a lot better and tested me a lot more in the online, was I realized a massive problem with my in-person coaching business was people would pay me, especially once I've been doing that for like a handful of years or whatever. I was like, okay, I'm the most expensive person in my community.
Mhm.
So I'm expensive relatively in that sense. So they have to pay me a lot of money, relatively speaking, to do this. They show up, they don't miss their sessions, but they're not getting results. And I'm like, yeah, and this isn't to say everybody, sure, I got people results, but like, I'll be honest, like there was a massive struggle with like, it's been 3 months. Why are we struggling here, right? And that's the best question to ask. And
Of course.
I probably avoided that question for a long time, thinking like, I guess of not thinking, right? Just avoiding that question entirely. And it's like when you actually face that, you are left with trying to figure out like this is what I was left with. I was left with the problem of like behavioral psychology and like why people do anything. So
Mhm.
then that's when it was actually a perfect kind of transition for me because the catalyst was that I got super nerdy into pain science for whatever reason.
Okay.
It didn't matter too much. Like it was helpful as an
Yeah.
in-person coach for sure, but I just found it super super interesting. So the learning more about like the biopsychosocial model of pain, and then how much all of the literature around that supported behavior change in regards to like why people even do a fitness program at all or make
Mhm.
any lifestyle change at all, whether it's healthy or not. Um, And then that basically became a massive tool for me, because then I was like, oh my goodness, this is how I unlock the problem I've been having, where like, okay, people are showing up, but they're still not getting the results I want. And I think that's from talking with other coaches that are in the in-person, not all of them for sure, but there's a lot of them that I think do struggle with that, where it's like, I can't get people to do stuff, and it's like,
Yeah.
and ultimately that is coaching. So being honest about that and being like, okay, I might not be as good of a coach as I think if I'm struggling to I don't know what that cutoff is, what percentage that is, how you quantify that. But if you are struggling with that more than not, then I think it's a big sign that you just need to improve as a coach. And probably the missing piece is like, all the technical stuff, you have all the knowledge, you have all the education, but if you can't motivate people or help them motivate themselves to actually make that lifestyle change, it just ends up being 12 months later, and they're like, the value proposition now has kind of diminished, and they go, yeah, I think like mortgages are up a little bit, and I'm just gonna take a break from training. And you have that conversation with a client, you're like, okay, yeah. And and you're not surprised, because you're like, I don't know what I could
Yep.
have done. So that's what helped me with the online big time, because I could use that to help kind of develop this coaching program that I have now, which is largely focused on helping people around just their behaviors around food.
So that brings up a few different topics, and kind of front of mind is like, what keeps a client around? So obviously when they purchase, they're not really purchasing anything other than results. They're purchasing the promise of results. So they're saying, I trust that Tim can get me to where I want to go, and I'm going to exchange this money for this result. Now, their results notwithstanding, they're probably going to stay with you because you're a really good person. You're great at building a relationship, and they value what you add to their life outside of the X's and O's of the nutrition. I've always said, like, people buy your results, but they stay with you for who you are
I
10
agree.
times out of 10. And so that coach who maybe has all the technical knowledge but can't get results, but is just a really good person, they probably run an okay business and be fine and have good retention. They just aren't getting results for their clients, which ultimately brings back the first reason that they came on board. Then it's coaching really is this like guide, mentor, educator, therapist. Like it's such an all encompassing role. And that's why I'm so big on talking about like the art of coaching, because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but unless you have an ability to attach that knowledge to something meaningful to that person, and it's going to change for every single person you work with, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And when it comes to behavior change, something that I've been diving into a lot more recently is like people's behaviors, especially when it comes to emotional eating or binging, things like that. Those behaviors are protective. They protected that person for a really long time. And all of a sudden, those behaviors are not serving them. And so they have to change them. And that's, any sort of change is going to bring up friction. So I'm wondering, in your education on pain science, which I think is, I agree, completely fascinating, you could draw a lot of parallels between physical pain and emotional pain,
Oh
and
yeah.
the different sorts of coping that people will endure when you take away their food.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Yeah, there's a lot there. Um, uh, I don't know.
Start anywhere.
Trying, yeah. Trying to think. Well, you touched on a bunch of things there. Because you're just talking about how, people, uh, for obviously the parallels between physical and emotional pain. Um, but going back to what you're saying, even just because it stuck out to me, it's like, if you're we can, and I won't pretend to say like I've figured it out by any means at all either. But I do feel like I figured out a bunch,
Yeah.
so that feels good when I'm like, oh, I'm, you get those light bulb moments, because I spent many years with no light bulb moments, right? Where I'm like, I'm
Mm.
struggling, but I'm trying to figure it out. And if I look back to that, I'm like, what you described was me, where I'm like,
Oh,
I was able to get a lot of clients some great results. and there was a lot of clients that really struggled and with my in-person business. And I think if I'm being perfectly, I'll try and be as honest as possible with it. It's like, and I can be hard on myself, like most people. So, but
Yeah.
it's like, if I look back, I'm pretty certain that there's a good chunk of folks that I was able to continue to build a relationship with and at least keep them consistent with regular training,
Mm-hmm.
even if we were struggling to make changes behaviorally in their lifestyle or whatever, just because they liked me.
For sure.
And so it was one of those things where I think that's a big part too, where, man, if you can just develop, that's a weird way to say it, develop, but like, because a lot of people probably just are naturally social people or whatever, like I probably am. But if you can at least connect with people on some level, and it doesn't have to be conventional or stereotypical by any means, it could be your own weird way. Um, but like if people connect with you, people will hang around. And that's not to imply like, oh, people hang around for bad coaching. That's not what I mean. But people
No,
will hang around, which will help keep them consistent at the very least while you try and help them as best you can.
a big barrier though that a lot of in-person coaches deal with is in that
Mm-hmm.
transition to the online space. How do you leverage technology? Like we know the answer because we do a good job, but leveraging technology to further foster those relationships rather than technology becoming a barrier to forming them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that
So,
the difference between that was me as an earlier online coach and not
okay.
using it really at all. And then being like, okay, well, there's softwares out there. And
Mhm.
right. And if I just learn how to use these on a fundamental level, they're very simple, then it's a great way for them to be like that process to come out kind of be streamlined where it's like, oh, my one client, whatever, she, Claire has a milestone of most volume lifted this week or whatever, and like like these little things that can happen and provide them that little dopamine drip of like, oh man, I'm a badass bitch, look at me go, like that's a good feeling, right, for someone to have that.
What are some of the tools that you use? Like, because we'll share yours and I'll share mine because I'm always curious, like
Sure.
what other coaches are using.
Sure. So the base ones that I'll use are what's built into the app. Like I use Trainerize to
Okay.
manage all my clients. So they already have all that stuff built into the workouts. And I'm sure
Mhm.
all the other apps have their versions of that too. Which is great. So when they're consistent and when they're consistent, they're adherent. And when they're adherent, we see streaks and they're getting rewarded from that. It's like I have clients all the time tell me with their Apple Watch, right? Like I don't have an Apple Watch, but they're always like, oh, I got my ring today or whatever that,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
get the
yeah.
ding. And Apple knows that. They know exactly what they're doing. It's
They're
like it's
gamifying.
perfect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gamma. It's if you can gamify the process, it makes it a lot more fun for people. So and they're more likely to be consistent. So there's already that stuff built into the app. And then a big one that I use, and it's time intensive, but it really does help, which is a lot of coaches do this, but this is just something that I didn't do in the past that has helped out a ton. But just having those weekly Loom videos,
Yeah, oh yeah.
like doing the weekly video of me going over all their data as well as their check-ins, being like, okay, here's what I'm seeing, here's all the good stuff, here's all the stuff that's not as good, but here's why we're okay. And then because this is a thing too, for a lot of clients, especially when you're working, I shouldn't even say this. I was going to say when you work with Gen Pop, but it probably doesn't matter. Probably just
Doesn't
humans in
matter.
general,
Yeah.
where it's like they're going to see the stuff they hate the most. So they're only going to see. I have a perfect example actually of this. Before this call, I had a client reach out to me and she goes, hey, I know you told me to reach out if I'm struggling with the scale. And if you remember our conversation last time, it's like, yes, I do. She goes, I'm pretty frustrated. I'm pretty frustrated with the scale right now. It's flat. And I was like, cool, no worries. Your check-in stuff is today, so I'm going to go over it all tomorrow. So I'll definitely go over it tomorrow. But I'm going to check it this aft anyway, and just kind of see and let you know what I think, right?
Mhm.
And I did a quick peek before I hopped on here to look, and she's fine. It's going down. But there's some mess in there, right? So
Yep.
because of the chaos, she's only seeing the chaos. She doesn't know how to pull out the trend and actually look at any of the wins. There's none of those. Meanwhile, this person is crushing their water. They're prioritizing their sleep. She's never missing her steps. She is doing way better at actually not pushing portions at food time, so leaving food on the plate when she's full,
Oh,
and avoiding snacking when she is hungry and has those feelings. Like there's tons of massive wins here that are like not small,
right.
but there's no way she's patting herself on the back for that. She's just looking at the scale going, I suck. Like this is horrible or whatever, right? Like, you know, she says she's frustrated. So part of the conversation that I'll have with her tomorrow is like, what are these feelings? Like, why are you frustrated? And just asking that non-judgmentally, just being like, what actually are you feeling around this? And then kind of hearing what those concerns are. And then once I hear those, I can kind of explain like, okay, well, here's what I'm seeing. Does this kind of make sense? You know, and if it doesn't, then we just talk about it further or whatever. But the idea is to give her some of that feedback. So then she gets that, like, if she can get that light bulb moment, then that gets her into that next step of like, now she's going in next week being like, okay, I have peace. Like I don't feel like I'm pushing square block into a round hole. Like I can, you know, like
Yep.
I don't have to feel awesome, but I feel like I can do this now, you know?
So I mentioned before we hopped on and went live that, when we were talking about what we were going to talk about today, a lot of the things that we forget or that we glance over are the things that a lot of beginner coaches need to unlock and need to realize. So just within that
Right.
conversation that you were able to have with your client, you wouldn't be able to get that sort of honesty from a client if you didn't present yourself as someone who is genuinely empathetic and caring and that you built a relationship with them. So
Right.
one precedes the other. And then being able to be, a sounding board for that person's concerns without judgment. And then just hold up a mirror and say, actually, you're doing
Yeah.
pretty not bad.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and
dude,
them actually
100%.
believe you.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Actually, them actually, that's the key too, right? Is they actually have to go, okay, this is hitting home. Like I get it. It's not that those feelings are completely gone, but I get it. It's rooting into my brain. And then I tell them, I'm like, dwell on that conversation, touch base, you know, tomorrow and tell me what you think about it.
Yeah.
You know, that actually reminds me of another conversation I had with a client this past week, like a few days ago. And she is struggling with a substance issue, right? And for whatever that looks like for her, right? And she's managing it with a qualified professional, but she shares it with me how it's going and whatnot.
Mhm.
And there was one point, how did she word it? She said something this past week about just how she was like, hey, I appreciate you not being judgmental about this, you know, just when I feel comfortable that I can share this.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, no problem at all. I appreciate that. But what I let her know was I was like, I don't want to assume here too much. So let me know if this is offensive, but I'm gonna be honest here. I wonder if you are like, the reason you're surprised that I'm not judgmental is maybe because you judge yourself. Like you're very hard on yourself and you're already
Mhm.
looking through this prism of like, she might not be thinking these words, but she has the feelings of like, I do this thing, and because I do it, I'm a piece of shit. So she has those emotions attached to it. And then if she tells somebody else about them, it's like they must think I'm a piece of shit too. It's like, no, you just think that. I don't think that about
Yeah.
you, you know? So and then she was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. I was like, yeah, you're just really hard on yourself. Like it's all good, you know, you're gonna be fine.
So many people put their own self-perceptions, they kind of project that onto other people. So
Yeah,
it's like the old example of if you have like a blemish on your skin and you go out in public, like, everyone's looking at my zit. It's like no
yeah,
one gives a
yeah,
shit about your zit, bro.
yeah. Well, it's ironic, right? Because that's it's interesting how that is kind of a manifestation or a symptom of kind of a self-centered living, because you assume everyone's looking at you, or everyone, even kind of a harsh term to just claim this, but like you think everyone cares, and like, to be honest, everyone cares about themselves, so like they're not actually thinking about
Exactly.
you nearly as much as you think they are. If they were actually accurately projecting, the accurate projection would be like, I think a lot about myself, so they must be thinking a lot about themselves.
Yep.
Right, like
I like that. I like that reframe.
well, and I use that reframe. That's like an easy, simple one for clients, because I get a lot of folks that are like not fitness people at all, but they want to be fitness people. So they're
Okay.
very new, like have no idea how to squat, no idea how to do a lunge, and are
Oh,
very, very afraid of the gym. So I get quite a bit of people like that, especially because of the in-person studio that we have, like 90% of clients at the in-person studio are those people. And because of that, I get a lot of people that are like, okay, I want to go to the gym. I have a gym membership, but I'm terrified. And it's almost always, it's a judgment thing where it's like, okay, I'm walking in the gym and it's the classic feelings of like, everyone here knows what they're doing. I don't, the feelings of just like, I don't belong. I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I even doing this? Everyone's looking at me, all these things. So reframing that can help.
Well, I always find that sort of stuff. Honestly, I find stuff like that probably the most challenging for me because those are feelings I've never had.
Hmm.
Right? Like I've never walked into a gym and felt like even from the beginning, I was an athlete, so like I knew what I was doing to some degree.
I
Um,
can relate with you. I can relate with you on that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
being able to put myself in their shoes and be able to be open to that. Um, the one question I did have for you is in creating a relationship, creating relatability, you're someone who has shared quite a bit about their personal journey. And I think as a business owner, it's a fine line to walk between sharing your own vulnerability in a way to make yourself human, but not, I think a lot of people struggle with not doing that because they feel like it invites kind of the wrong type of message. I'm wondering like if that's ever been something because you've shared about your issues with substance abuse, you've shared about your recovery, um, and you've shared about like the things that you're even doing now to continue to develop yourself.
Mhm.
How has the thought process been with that? Have you just kind of put it out there and seen what happened, or was that like a calculated?
Dude, good question. So, and yeah, you kind of pre-framed that very well, actually, because I think that that is it's interesting to kind of see other people's strategies with that. And not to say that there's a right or wrong at all, but my personal approach to this, and because I think I'd made the odd implication to certain kind of mental health struggles I'd had, but I realized that I was like, man, I have a lot to say about this stuff, and I don't feel scared to do it. Not to say, oh, like I'm brave or whatever, but like truthfully, it just doesn't, it's not hard for me to share that stuff. So I think I should share this stuff a little bit more because how I was looking at it is I was on that end of the spectrum of not sharing any of it. And at least publicly, right? Talking to just social media and stuff. So like my family and people close to me all very well aware of stuff like this, but as far as social media, like a lot of people wouldn't know, a lot of people that had followed me for a while. And what I realized was, especially through like feedback either through social media or people that follow me on social media but then talk to me in person about it, is
Mhm.
I was getting feedback, and I still get this, but I was getting exclusively feedback that like almost implied like you're different, like you're a
Oh,
fitness guy. You're a fitness guy. You go to the gym. It's easy for you. And they wouldn't say that, but there's that implication that
yeah, for
you're
sure.
just a fitness person. I assume you've always been a fitness person, and I'm different than you. I'll never be you, but I wish I could. Like that those types of, it was very like separated, right? And I realized that there would be a lot of utility if I could move myself down that spectrum a bit. I'm like, okay, I'm moving myself very out of touch with the people that I want to work with. When really like I'm a lot like them in a lot more ways than they think, but the way I've curated my social media maybe is giving off this persona that it's not. And I'm like, this is like, I'm consistent with the gym. I'm in a different place than you are, sure, but like we're a lot more similar than you might think.
So it almost felt like you're being by not sharing that you're being disingenuous.
100%. Yeah. I was like, exactly. I felt like and specifically doing a disservice. I was like, I need to share my story. And it was, and I actually got confirmation when I started opening up a little bit more about it. And I made one of my first posts about it a year or two ago.
Mhm.
And And I had several people reach out, but I can remember one in particular that said, "This is really good to see because they called me a fitness influencer. They're like, this is really nice to see from someone who's a fitness influencer that makes it seem like they've always been a fitness person." I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess you wouldn't know unless I tell you." So
Mm.
that was like a big factor in me like starting to share that because and then you think about it, it's like uh it aligns perfectly. Like when you think about like what is their perception of me, well, they're telling me first of all, but then if I put myself in their shoes, before they would, just looking at it even from like a business perspective, where someone's following my stuff, developing trust, developing authority, and they like me. And there's someone who's like, oh man, I've dieted, 3, 4, 5 times in my life. I've been to the gym on and off, but never stick to it. I wish I could be someone like that. Maybe I would hire them, but man, they seem so, I
Rigid.
don't know. They seem, or yeah, rigid for sure, but like just so too different, like just too different. It's like they can't find the relatability. And it's
Yeah.
like if it's that much disconnect, I'm not reaching down with like a hand to be like, oh no, we have this to connect on. Like we can hold
Mhm.
hands on this. And they go, oh dude, I had no idea. That's cool. This is my story about that. And then all of a sudden, I know it gets over, it's probably a bit cliche, but like and you said it yourself because it is true, but like it does humanize me in a sense. Cause like
Sure.
if I'm at the gym and I'm telling people I never miss sessions, if I only say that, it kind of comes off a little arrogant or just like I have discipline down to a T. And they're like, well, how does he do this? But I guess it's because he doesn't have kids or, he's not in his 40s yet or whatever. They create their own
Yeah. They
narrative.
create the narrative. And
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sitting here nodding my head because like I know for a fact that I've missed out on getting clients because my outward perception, like the outward portrayal that I have to the public, is that I'm rigid, I'm ultra disciplined, and I expect everyone around me to be the same.
Mm,
When the reality is I don't give a fuck what you do, and I don't
right.
judge anyone around me. And this is
Mm-hmm.
just how I choose to live my life. And I choose to live my life because of all the challenges I've faced in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Right.
just don't share that part publicly as much,
Mm-hmm.
for a few different reasons, but ultimately it comes down to I don't think it would serve me in the same way that it served you.
Sure.
And I also I'm somewhat of a private person. And that's fine. Be at
Yep.
as making that decision, I have to be okay with the trade-off that comes along with it.
Totally. Yeah, that's where I was saying there's no right or wrong. I think it's just a right or wrong for you. Cause like what you said, actually the biggest one in my opinion
Mhm.
is you're like, I'm a private person. That's all it needs to be said. It's like if it aligns like that aligns with your values, then that's the right,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That makes the most sense for you.
I've kind
So
of tried to share the pieces that are relevant. So like I won't post about it on social media, but if I'm ever on a podcast, I'll talk about the fact that I go to therapy every month and I used to go every
mm-hmm,
week or twice a week and I have been for the last 7 years, right? So
mm-hmm,
I'll talk about that. I'll talk about, my issues with anxiety, things that I, have gone through but I feel like social media with like 60-second, 90-second clips,
yeah.
medium is the message, man, and it could be
Yeah.
misconstrued so quickly.
I was just thinking that, man, where you said you shared on a podcast. I was like, you know what? If you're gonna share it, if you choose to share it, right?
Yeah.
Then I think if you were gonna choose to share it and you were going to choose that medium, long form's the best because it's already going to self-select for the people that want to hear you spew on whatever. So like you're already having someone that's like, I want to listen to Paul talk for an hour or two. So like what a perfect type of person
Guy's
that's probably
crazy.
open to hearing about that, Yeah. Yeah. Who'd want to do
I
that?
know. I always joke whenever I've had like I had Ed Cohn on the
Oh,
podcast,
that's awesome.
and I was like, he's like, man, I'm so thankful, Paul, for you to have me on your podcast. I'm like, yeah, my three friends and my mom are really going to enjoy listening to you.
Yeah, yeah, right. You're like, this is just selfish. This is just selfish. I
This
just
is
want to
just
talk to you.
selfish. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Funny enough, actually. So kind of off topic, but on topic.
Yeah, yeah.
You know which podcast guest to this day has the most downloads of any podcast guest?
On your
On
podcast?
my podcast,
No.
my mother.
Oh, that's cool. I love that.
Yeah. My mom came on. She talked about, my mom is 60 years old.
Cool.
She's been active her whole life, was running marathons, then got into weight training. She still runs, she still trains 5 days a week. She was talking about how growing up, all the social norms and things like that around weight training for women and things like that just set her up to be the black sheep, and how she was
Mhm.
constantly, she was weight training with me when she was pregnant. And like I was in the, like, all that stuff that would be super frowned upon 37 years
Yeah.
ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And she just kind of kept it up, and she went on a tirade about
Oh, I
people who
love
say
it.
you're so lucky you're fit.
Oh, good for her. That's a great message. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about the group coaching because it's something that honestly fascinates me because
Hmm.
I feel like, especially in your case, we talked a lot about relationship building. We talked a lot
Hmm.
about, how you kind of connect with that one person. How do you do that to a group of people in an online medium?
So I'll correct you on this, and maybe this means I need to improve my messaging. It's not actually group. It is
Oh,
one-on-one. It is one-on-one.
okay.
It is one-on-one. There's group aspects. So I have the community,
Okay.
the paid community that they'll be a part of. And I do that in the app as well. So leveraging technology that way. It's beautiful. And then I provide value in there and kind of just create engagement with everybody else. That's been one of the best changes I've made in the more recent little while, to provide that peer support. Because actually, funny enough, that ties in with what we were just talking about, the unrelatability, because they're talking to me constantly, which is
And they
great
don't
because
talk
like
to each other.
they don't talk to each other, which like
Oh,
they're going
beautiful.
through the thing, right? Like, so I'm
Yep.
like, man, they're just talking to what they feel like is this person always ahead of them. So there's this social dynamic that like they're here, I'm here. Not that I'm better, but they may even have those feelings. So it's like it's so much better if they can have a conversation with, like, I work with a lot of moms and a lot of parents, and like,
Mhm.
so if I have a mom who's like perimenopausal or something, and then she's talking to me, 32-year-old male, it's like, um I can't relate. I help as best I can. But at the same time, like when they're having a conversation with another mom in there, it's like, they're like, oh, I totally get that. Yeah, high five. Anyways, man, that's crazy. It's like they can actually have that conversation. It means way more than coming from me. Even if what I say is technically correct, it's like they don't care, and they shouldn't care as much,
Well,
because it's like
in
it's
that
just
end,
me.
like you just kind of curate the conversation. You lead it in the
Yeah.
direction it needs to go, and then you just kind of
Uh,
let it roll.
So that's
Love
been
that.
huge. So that's kind of the group aspect of the online coaching, but it's still one-on-one. So the big aspects of that is like the private daily chat that they'll have with me. One aspect that I get my clients to do right now in the program, at least, I'm actually in the middle, kind of tactical stuff here, but like I'm literally in the middle of figuring out a way to streamline this a little bit better.
Mhm.
But I have all my clients for the start of the program for at least the first month, and this will kind of depend. Sometimes they'll extend it longer depending on where they are at as far as results. But at least for the first month, I have clients take photos of all their meals and send it to me, and I'm
Mhm.
providing feedback every single day on all of their food. Um,
It's a lot.
so it's a lot. It's a lot. And I've streamlined it as best I can with that, but I'm probably going to shift that out for obvious reasons.
Mhm.
The scalability is just tough on that. And I don't think it's valuable, but I think I can take the valuable parts about that, and then kind of I can replicate it elsewhere. Like you can log it in the app and stuff like that as well. And then I can provide feedback once a week or twice a week or whatever it is instead of daily. But that's a big factor because I have clients, right now that'll be sending me messages, like they'll be sending you messages or whatever, but they'll be sending me messages, and some of them will be going out for dinner tonight. It's like, hey, what am I going to play here? We're going out to this restaurant. Here's what I'm going to do. What do you think? Do you have a whatever? And it's like I can have that conversation with them for, I send a voice note for a minute, just being like, here's what I want you to do. Blah, 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 blah. We know for you're going to have to think about this. So just don't forget about that. I'm like, okay, cool. So like that's kind of a big aspect, is having that intensive support for social stuff, which is, I think, a big barrier for a lot of people when they start a fitness program, because which this has actually informed my marketing quite a bit in the last little while, is, and I know it can come off like corny to people or whatever, but it is, I think it's closer to the message that my clients need to hear, which is when people are like, okay, I want to get fit again, immediately what they all think of is like, all right, Tupperware, same meals every day, never change. If my parents want to have
Restriction,
dinner,
restriction, restriction.
yeah, I have to say no to everything. I have a vacation coming up, so I guess, well, my diet's screwed, like, so they want everything to be perfect, which is already something I try and help them reframe anyway. So I'm only promoting that more by being like, yeah, everything's going to be perfect, instead of being like, no, you have a trip coming up in 2 weeks. Great. The program still runs. There's going to be a great opportunity for us to figure out and actually use this as an opportunity to expose some of the things that we can work on. Because guess what? I look at them, I'm like, you're going to have more trips coming up. And they're like, yes, I am. And I'm like, we should probably figure out how to make this work now, because
Hmm.
in the future we can get it better every single time. Um, so that's like a big one too, is just having that, being able to market to clients and be like, no, we can totally, you can get the changes that you want to see. Um, we can talk about timeline for sure, but you can see the results, you can achieve the results that you want to see with all of the social stuff that you think you can't do. Like, you know what I mean? Especially with summer coming up.
Which is such an empowering message, especially for someone who more often than not is likely going to be coming to you with like super limiting beliefs around food. They're
Oh yeah.
probably afraid to eat at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're telling them, no, like you can lose weight no matter what. And we're going to give you the tools. And in spite of not being perfect, because perfect doesn't exist, you're still going to make the progress that you want to make and you're going to be really happy about it. It's just going to take some work on your part and some open communication.
That's literally it. That's literally it. It's like if
That's the pay to play, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like if I go through going through and this is something for like coaches listening, if you don't, I just had this thought now. It's like if you, just because you touched on it, if you don't have, when you're onboarding a client, just my recommendations, if you don't have like your must do's in your coaching service,
Mhm.
that's like a huge mistake that I missed for a while, where it's like, here's the program, here's what happens, let's start. And like it was all good, professional, laid out, nice, but I didn't have, hey, Paul, here's what matters. Here's what's highlighted in red in all caps. You
Mhm.
must do these things. Do you understand? Does this make sense? Do you have any questions? And
Yep.
they go, okay, cool. And here's why I need you to do them. Like I explain it very clearly. So then they're like, okay, this makes sense to me. Because if they go half in, they're the ones who see half results, you know?
It's my favorite. A coach, like, because I work with a lot of coaches now, and it's like, oh, they know what's expected. I was like, oh yeah, did you put it in writing? No. Did they sign it? No. How often do
Yeah.
you give it to them? Well, I tell
Yeah.
them. It's like,
Yeah. Right.
good luck.
Yeah, well, dude, literally, that's a perfect example. It's like I told all my clients exactly what I need them to do, or I briefly explained it, even if it wasn't in writing. But I didn't ask, "Hey, did you also review that over again?" And like whatever. Now I have like just a better system of being like, "Hey, sign off on this. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Did you read it? Is there any questions? Are you clear on this and why it matters?" It's so much better because I started to look at, this is more in kind of the last year or so as I've really started to grow my own the online coaching,
Mhm.
is that was one of the things I realized where I'm like, I had the same problem, uh, different, I guess, different diagnosis, but a similar problem as I had with the in-person where I'm like, okay, I have clients that are crushing it and I have clients that are struggling. What's the difference here? And one of the things that I could control was I was like, oh, these ones just heard me better for whatever reason. It's not, you know what I mean? And so I'm like, if I just dial in my communication right off the bat, I think I can help filter out those people, and maybe that's not a way to say it, filter in, to be honest, like those people that otherwise would have not heard that and then been, 2 months in, a month and a half in, and been like, oh yeah, what day do you want me to check in? It's like, no, 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 no. Like you've been late three weeks in a row. That can't happen. Like we need to know from the start. And if
Yeah.
I can take the onus, if I can take the responsibility as a coach for that, where I'm like, yeah, I could communicate that better, then that's what I should do. It's easy. It's an easy fix as well.
It's an easy fix if you have ownership over everything in the process. And I'll also say, like, we as coaches have ownership over who we allow into our coaching programs. And also, in general, people do a really poor job self-selecting for their clients. And what I mean by that is like, so we'll take you as a case study. If I go to your page and I look at your story and I look at your posts, it is very clear the avatar of the person you're trying to talk to. And it seems very simple, but a lot of people make this mistake of they're very broad in their discussion points. They don't actually talk to a specific person. They run these I'm looking for 5 people to DM me fit to enter, this free thing. It's like you're going to get people who are the type of people to respond to those things. You're not going to get people who are actually committed to change.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're making sure that you are speaking to the avatar of the exact person that you want to serve. So for you, it's that person who's repeatedly failed at diets, who's tried going to the gym, but really hasn't had it stick, who's at the point where they need something different. You have positioned yourself as that something different and you have a solution to their problem. And they know Tim Walcott can solve my problem.
Dude,
It's going to be
exactly.
way easier
That's
to sell
yeah.
your service if they're already asking for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they'll let them put their hand up, right? I think that was a big learning curve for me as well, as I'm sure it was for you at some point in your
Yeah,
journey
for
too,
sure.
where you're like, and then once you make this shift, you start to see it in everybody else, obviously, right? Where you're like, oh
Yeah.
man, I know they're good. They could just tweak a couple things there because like I know they have the thing. And that's how I felt for so long, where it's like, man, I'm a good coach. I know I could do this. Like I
Yeah.
know I have the confidence that I can deliver results if someone puts their hands up and go, hey, I'll pay you. But the biggest one that kind of goes off what you're saying, where I did that, in case anyone is listening to this or watching this that is currently doing this, this is like the easy. I think this is a quick and easy change that you can do, which
Yeah.
is if you are putting out, and I know you've read all the Hormozy stuff too.
Yeah.
So it's like if you can move away from like selling the flight and sell the vacation. So stop saying that like, I'm going to give you a meal plan. I'm going to give you a training plan. By the way, I have daily support. You know what I mean? And like whatever, it's like all those things, like all those are great. Like those are,
They're
value,
features.
they're features and they do matter, but it's like that does not help people put their hand up because they're like, because this is the thing that ultimately this is what I love about entrepreneurship. I don't know. That's sometimes that sounds pretentious. I love business ownership because it forces me to become way less selfish and self-centeredness with the way I
Mhm.
think because I'm forced, if I want to grow and help more people, I have to get out of my own head and I have to think like the person I want to help and like what are their problems. It's like, and if I think about it, guess what they're not doing? They're not going scrolling through Instagram going like meal plan, training program, private chat. I've never seen anyone offer this. This is exactly what I need. They're not thinking that, right? You're
Nope.
going to get people trickling, sure, I get it. But that's not an irresistible offer. Like that is not people that are going like this will be life changing because that's not speaking to any problems. They haven't connected the dots that I get those are all tools. They're features, they're tools. It's like meal plan, all the things that are part of the program are all necessary. But you got to think that the prospect is not actually they're not connecting the dots that when they read that, they go, that's what I need. It's like, no, it's your job as the coach to connect those dots. You got to go farther down the pipeline of like where they're actually at. You're just too far away. And I did that for so long,
Yep.
where it's like, I'm just speaking about the features being like, guys, the features are awesome. Like, you guys all want this, right? And like this will work if you just try it. Not thinking like I need to speak their language a little bit better and speak to like what are they actually thinking right now.
Well, I always like to look at it like, so you get like a high-end sports car, like a Ferrari. Okay. Yeah, a Ferrari has a lot of horsepower. The engine is beautiful. It makes a great sound. But you know what? The navigation system in my Dodge Ram Limited is fucking sick. Ferrari doesn't have that. Ferrari doesn't have a heads-up display. Ferrari doesn't have, heated and cooled seats. Ferrari, like, so the features of the Ferrari are cool, but there's stuff with better features. But I don't get the same feeling driving my Dodge Ram that I would if I was driving a fucking Ferrari.
Yeah, yeah,
People want
right.
to buy the Ferrari. They don't want to buy
Yeah,
the Dodge Ram. So that's the way I've kind of put forth. My biggest challenge with marketing, full disclosure to anyone listening, is like I built my business on an they came, so I built it. Like I was a coach for a really long time, never did online. I was, collegiate strength coach. Then I started being a really good power lifter, so people wanted to be coached by me. So I started offering coaches or coaching. Then I had been coaching for a really long time, doing it really well, and people were like, "Hey, help me build my business." So I started a mentorship. But the challenge within that is I've worked with so many people from Paul Hewitt's mom to CFL and NFL pros. So who's my market?
right,
What I've come to realize is you can still niche down.
right.
So I've niched down to the psychographic portion of it. So
Okay.
you can talk about demographic, like where they live. Uh, so sorry, demographic in terms of like who they are, like
Mm-hmm.
age, sex, that sort of thing, or gender, if you want to go that route.
Yep.
Um, there's like environmental, so like location, or psychographic. So like I coach people who want to be the best versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care if you're a pro athlete or somebody's mom.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be the best version of yourselves, I can coach you and I will help you get there. And that's kind of what we built our business model off of. And I think you're getting to that point where you're developing a really strong personal brand, and everything that you're doing is built off of this anti-diet program.
Mhm.
And so everything you do is built on that. So for me, everything I do is built off of raise the bar. It's I raise the bar for myself and the things that I do. All of our coaches raise the bar for themselves and their clients. I have an education platform to help other coaches raise the bar. So like I think that's part of something that's missing for a lot of young entrepreneurs is I don't think that sounds pretentious. I actually really like the word entrepreneur, and I think people should say it more often, as long
Sure.
as you actually are one.
Yeah, 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 I get it.
But I think it's part of entrepreneurship that is the most fun is developing that personal brand that kind of guides all your decision making because it makes things a lot fucking easier.
Dude, so and it is hard. It can be hard because especially when you have the shiny object syndrome, which is
Mhm.
typical in entrepreneurship, it's like that can be hard too because you haven't really sat down and thought like what is my thing,
Yep.
And I think sometimes all the one of the challenges I found too is like looking at it through this lens that kind of everyone else does, where you see them state their avatar and then you go, okay, what's my version of that? And it's like your version of that could be a totally different equation. That's the problem with that because you're looking at it through the lens. It could be a totally different lens. Like even what you said, where it's like someone could go through like gender, age, job, SES, socioeconomic status, whatever. Um, but like they wouldn't think psychographic, right? They're like, oh, that's a totally different
Mhm.
like direction to come at it with. Like I didn't even think about that. So that means like a lot of your clients can and probably will have wildly different life experience. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
current life situations. But where they connect is that they're just high achievers, high performers in
Or they
some
desire they
aspects.
desire to be. Yeah.
Yes, right, right,
Yeah.
right. So
So
that's kind of cool.
and look, I've been coaching since 2007. I only came up with that 2 years ago.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Right. So this
yeah,
is so for anyone listening, this is like a long-term play here.
yeah. Well, dude, I have an interesting thing on that for what it's worth because I've been thinking a lot about that because
Yeah.
that's one of the obvious pipelines you go down. It's like okay, like I specifically you hear a lot of other coaches being like, okay, you got to niche down. You can't say yes to everybody. And then you start thinking about like what does that look like for me, and I've found some decent clarity with that, and I'm continuing to refine that and build that up and just establish that more, and I think it gets stronger with time the more you do it.
Absolutely.
um right, because time's just the compounding factor with that, I think. But when we were at my wife Sam and I were at Andrew Coates fitness
Yep.
events last October, um in Edmonton. So I heard Don Saladino speak.
Hmm.
And I pulled him aside after and was like, hey, do you mind if I ask you a couple questions? He's like, yeah, no problem. So um I was like, because I'm aware that he's also, I think like mid to late 40s, like, and he's been coaching for a long time and training. He's worn a ton of different hats.
Hmm.
So I was like, I asked him his thoughts on that, where I'm like, hey man, here's a description of like people I work with, um, and he, it's pretty wide ranging, right? Like here's people that follow my stuff and they're more powerlifter, young guy, more similar to me. They're just not along far. They're not as far along the fitness journey as I
Yep.
am, but they're more like me phenotypically and in every sense.
Hmm.
And then you have the people like that I work with the anti-diet program, which is like a lot of them are female and a lot of them are 35 to 55. And and so I was kind of explaining that to him. I'm like, am I wasting my time with this? Like, am I still way too broad and my next step is to siphon down immediately? And his advice was, he was like, you should continue to coach everybody, right? If that fits, if you're coaching those people,
Hmm.
continue to coach those people because over time it will become more apparent. And he was like, and then he goes, how long have you been coaching for? I'm like, 8 years. And he goes, yeah, so you're still early. So like, he's like, when I was 8 years into coaching, I was still doing in person, waking up at 3:30 a.m. to go coach in person. And, I had a gym and,
Yep.
and all that in New York City and all that. And I was like, And so that was like really valuable for me because I think I'd already had this pressure put on me from the stuff I see on social media and whatever of like, oh man, I'm so behind because I just don't have my niche. And actually, what made me think about it is because during his talk, right, he had that question. It's like, hey, who can share their avatar, their niche? Like, who do you go after and be as specific as possible? Who wants to share that? And I was thinking about it. I was like, how I opened up the conversation with him was I was like, hey, when you asked that question, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I've thought about it a lot, but I was like, man, if I wanted to answer this question, I'd be like, well, it depends who asks, or it depends who I'm marketing to. I'm like, I kind of have two, maybe three. And then he was like, yeah, that's fine. Just keep coaching them. It's just
Yeah.
funny because even in that span of time since October, I've already refined. Even a lot has happened
Yep.
in my marketing, in my messaging, in my coaching that's allowed me to kind of niche down, like do exactly what I was struggling to do.
It's a more complicated question than just like, who's your avatar? Because
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I know a lot of coaches that have come to me. They're like, these are the people that I coach, and they don't really make me excited. And
Right.
it's like, okay, well, why do they come to you? It's like, because I'm really good at this. Okay, well, that's a different question. So if it doesn't light your fire, let's maybe not do that anymore. Or let's
Right.
maybe shift our dialogue. Or it's I'm coaching like a bunch of people and my business is growing, but should I niche down? It's like, hell no, your business is growing, you're doing great,
Yeah.
people are happy. There's no need to do that.
Yeah.
Um, I think people have these ideas, and you hit the nail on the head. It's like you're pressured by social media to do things, but those things might not be necessary right now. If you have, a coaching program that is thriving and growing, and it excites you, well, just keep doing that stuff
Totally.
and talking about it, and then it should keep growing. And
Yeah.
maybe 3 years down the line, you're like, "Ah, I really don't like this diet stuff this anti-diet stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm seeing a different sort of trend within the industry that really resonates with me, and you start pivoting your messaging. But no matter what, it's not going to change the core of who you are and what kind of service you provide, which is ultimately what keeps your clients with you anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people get into this race to acquire clients super fast, like customer acquisition, customer acquisition, customer acquisition. And it's because the people telling them that they need, I'm going to go on a rant here. The people
Go
tell
for it.
them that they need to acquire clients and focus on customer acquisition all the time are the same fucking people running 21-day challenges and churning through clients like it's no tomorrow. If you don't lose your clients, you don't need to acquire clients that fast.
Yeah. And it's cheaper, right? The classic like retention's cheaper than acquisition. So
100%. And all you
yeah.
have to do is be a good coach. Oh shit.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's the best part about it is the solution is providing a good service. It's like we know the importance of marketing and all the stuff that a lot of coaches, kind of squirm at or whatever.
Yeah.
Or some are actually they probably love that more than the coaching, which is fine.
Yep.
But also I think what they may be more prone to is you end up in this position where you are just like what you said. It's like there's some type of disproportionate focus and effort into acquisition, and then you're like, how is there any holes in the boat that you could plug here? Because I bet you there probably is. Like
That's a great
like everybody
analogy.
everybody everybody has holes in the boat they
Oh,
can plug. So
100%.
like if you're, I think the thing is if the acquisition is taking away from the actual service, right, then you're
That's a
gonna
problem.
the hole it's a problem. The holes are gonna grow, and then and also that's also an unsustainable way to live. Like forget about the business. Like obviously it's not, it's gonna really, you're gonna feast your famine in a situation like that probably.
Yeah.
But man, that sounds like really stressful way to live because you're just constantly like just at some point you're probably going to come off desperate in your marketing because you're going to have a down month, and then it's like, I need people to pay me now, and it's like, but
That's
the thing is you
exactly it.
you
Tim,
could have
this
had
is
you could have had clients to pay, you could have clients paying you now that liked you last month that wanted to keep paying you
yeah.
but they left.
And
you
this
know
is this is like this is one of the reasons why the conference I went to last month, I left early. I was like, this isn't the
oh,
type.
did you?
Yeah, I was like, this isn't the type of shit I want to be talking about.
Right,
Um,
right.
and I built my business, and I know you've done the same on putting people first. And that was a big reason why I wanted to have you on today. And I think, honestly, I think we did a fantastic job showcasing that to like, you can do a whole lot of different things. You can wear a whole lot of different hats. And the business you have today is probably not going to be the business you have 3 years from now. And that's totally okay. And it's probably for the best.
Yeah, just letting it naturally evolve over time. It touches on the niche conversation we just had, where it's like I'm a big fan of taking action. Like
Hmm.
and I struggle with that just like anybody else. I'm not this crazy action taker. Like I sit in
Crazy
fear.
action
I
taker.
yeah, like I sit in fear just like everybody else before making a scary decision. But at the same time, it's like I think when it comes to figuring out who you're going to work with, you can also kind of let time start to show you. Because as you even like, and it ties in with what you just said, where it's like if you just focus on the coaching, the actual service, and just tweaking, just tweak. Like I could streamline this, make this better. Like get feedback from clients so that it's like, oh, I didn't even think about adding that in. Like I should have asked them before. Great. And then before you know it, you're like, you kind of have this machine that naturally you look at it and you're like, oh shit, you like step back and you're like, this actually speaks to a certain person. And I didn't even actively niche down. It kind of just
Yep.
happened over time. So I think there is something. I'm not telling people to be lazy about it, but I am saying that like I think if you focus on the coaching over time, it will probably expose itself, which is great.
Well, if you just focus on the coaching and then your outward marketing or outward portrayal of your business is just talking about things that you do with your clients or answering questions that they ask you, boom, you have a brand. Like it's not
Yeah,
this
dude,
is
seriously.
it's not rocket surgery.
No, seriously. Yeah, no, literally.
So I wanted to dive into kind of, both you and we compete in powerlifting, but also have spouses who are very high level competitors in bodybuilding. And I wanted to touch on that, but I actually think we're just going to tease out the fact that we're going to do an entire episode on it. So there you go.
Yeah, we
Um,
probably could too.
we're going to do an entire episode and we'll have our spouses on and we'll talk
Yeah,
about it. So stay
that'd be
tuned
good.
for that. So Toronto Pro Show is June 4th, 5th, 6th, something around there. We'll do the
Second, third,
second,
second,
third.
third. Yeah.
So we'll do it after both of our partners are well fed and have
Mhm.
energy, and it'll be a lot better of a podcast. But I do like to finish my podcast with some really stupid questions because I think it's
Okay,
just fun.
dude, hit me.
First one, we'll kind of warm it up a little bit. Okay, so when
Okay.
you crack an egg, do you crack it on the corner of the pan or on a flat surface?
Oh, you know where I go? It doesn't make any. This is going to expose a lot about me. This is embarrassing. I smash it on the edge of the stove.
That's not even the
Like,
worst. So one of my people that I interviewed said he smashes the two eggs together.
oh, I love that. That's so like animal brain. Like,
Yeah.
oh. Is he a power lifter?
He's bodybuilding.
Yeah. Okay. I'm like,
Um,
that's so meathead, just like protein.
Favorite flavor is in.
Well, I use the Zonix. Um, but chill mint, because like you want to feel like you got a clean mouth, you know?
You got to order some of these. Rogue.
Oh, dude, tell me
I
about
found
these.
them. I
Okay.
found them when we were in the US.
Mm.
They don't hit as hard as Zins and they last longer. The flavor is incredible.
That's what I like about the Zonix is like I'm not hitting bongs over here. I'm just hitting off a light joint every couple hours. Like
Fair enough.
I'm you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sophisticated. I'm not a cigarette smoker, I'm a cigar smoker.
I've had to avoid nicotine products for the last few days because I have a blood test for life insurance tomorrow.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So I'm like kind of jonesing for it.
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
have an addiction. You have an
No,
addiction.
no, of course not. Of course not. But it's such a
Um,
good one.
what is one album that you could listen to with no skips?
Uh, B by Common or
Dude, yeah.
yeah. It's got one of the best like first tracks of any album that's like so underrated in my opinion. It's
Him as a
like it's
rapper is underrated.
yeah. Well, yeah, exactly, right? I don't even know if he's still putting out music, but I was gonna say so that album, I'll give you three because they're all kind of different. Well, kind of. So you have B from Common, you have Dark Twisted Fantasy, Kanye West, and then you have that one. That one's like a no skip. And then the a little bit of our mutual friend Jeb will appreciate this one. But Strand of Oaks has an album called Heal, and that one's just a banger. It's like 70s synth indie stuff.
Yeah, that
Um,
one's way over my head.
yeah, yeah. But
My
the other ones people know.
my go-to is Nas Illmatic.
Oh, nice. Yeah, dude,
Um,
that's a all dude,
yeah,
you could probably hit with like most of the raps from like the rapping albums from that era. Like most of them are non-skips, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Last question. You have five dinner guests, dead or alive, you plus five. Who's it going to be?
Ooh, dude, that's good. Um, I want some unhinged people there for sure, but you also need some interesting people that would provide some conversation. So we'll balance it out a bit.
Okay.
Donald Trump,
Okay.
um, Michael Jordan, not because I like basketball, but he's gonna make it weird in some way. He's gonna try and beat
For
somebody at
sure.
something.
Yeah.
Um, probably have some crazy like cocaine stories from the 80s or something that he hasn't told anybody, Like tell me about the Bulls in the 80s, dude. I bet you there's some crazy parties.
Oh, yeah.
Um, So was that two? Michael Jordan, Donald Trump, Iman Godzi. I don't know if you know who that is. Um, he made $1 million by the time he was 17. Grew up as a single mom in Russia. Crazy cool dude. Crazy cool dude.
Okay.
I'm going down his rabbit hole. He's awesome. Puts out really good stuff too. He's like 24 now or something too. Like still super young, but like I love this dude. He's awesome.
Okay.
So Iman Godzi, and then the other two, we'll go back unhinged. We'll get Kanye West in there. Um, and then the fifth, dead or alive, eh? Sam, who's the fifth person I have at dinner?
Your wife.
Oh yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Paul said my wife.
Jesus
Do you want to
Christ.
come to the dinner? She's like, Jesus Christ, obviously. Yeah, but that's like the obvious one, right? But
Jesus is a very popular guest at these dinner
that's of
parties,
course,
in
right?
my
Of course.
experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you really rise in 3 days? Well, I guess you're here at the dinner, so I guess you did.
Or
Why'd
that
you
was
wait?
what
Why'd you wait 40 days and 40 nights, huh? Like why?
Yeah, what was the thought process here? So yeah, I'll choose my wife. I'll choose my wife.
Okay. Good. Yeah, she's
Just
a
yeah. No, it's a good safe bet.
and
She asked good questions. So
the final thing that I would like to know from you, if there's one person you would like to have me interview on this podcast, who would it be? But you have to help me get them on.
oh, good question. Um, you've probably had another mutual friend of ours, Andrew Clayton, on. You probably already had him on.
I haven't yet.
Oh, okay. I would say
Okay.
Andrew.
Okay.
Or Stuart, also mutual friend.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Dude, that was an absolute pleasure. I will have links. I'm going to actually reach out to you for links and a picture, but we'll have
Sure.
links to where you can find Tim and his coaching in the show notes if you want to connect with him. Any parting words of wisdom, my friend?
Um, Dude, other than just a big thank you to you. I appreciate you giving me this platform and allowing me to kind of just talk shop with you. It was a ton of fun. And I really do hope that you said most of the people listening will be coaches. So I'm hoping like
Mm,
some of that is valuable. I haven't,
sure.
I'm still early in the game, but I'm constantly feeling like I have these light bulb moments. And when I do, it's like it's that moment where you're like, man, I wish someone had I wish someone had told me this before, because they probably did and I just didn't hear it. But I wish I'd figured this out before. So I'm hoping someone has some of those moments, even just one throughout this conversation, because that would mean a lot.
Dude, I'm sure they will. This is a really valuable conversation, and it was a pleasure for you to be on the podcast. I'm excited to have Sam on the podcast, in a couple months. And yeah, everyone, thank you so much. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one. Tim, peace out.
Peace, dude.